Hello, I'm Pip, and welcome to the Midwife Pip podcast, the home of expert information and real chats on all things pregnancy, birth, and beyond. Remember, as a podcast listener, you can get 15% off all my online courses at midwifepip.com using the code podcast15. If you're a parent, then you will know that parenting is super hard. It's the most chaotic rollercoaster of emotions. So much magic, but also a fairly hefty dose of challenge, learning, and troubleshooting. This week, I am joined by the lovely Rosey Davidson, known on Instagram as Just Chill Mama. Rosey is a baby and toddler sleep expert, an author to her brand new book that, when you're listening today, will be available for pre-order, the Just Chill Baby Sleep Book. Quite honestly, if you're a parent, then you need a little bit of Rosey in your life. So welcome, Rosey, and thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Very excited to pick your brains because as a parent myself and speaking to so many parents, I think sleep is probably one of the hottest topics that we talk about. It's like up there on the priority list as a new mum, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something that everyone has difficulty with, is interested in improving. We can get a little bit obsessed with it as well.
That is so true. And, you know, guilty as charged, Rosey. When Finley was younger, I was definitely one of those that got obsessed with sleep because you're just so desperate and you end up comparing yourself to absolutely everybody, which is why your whole mantra of just chill.
Yes.
And the fact that you just said everybody worries about it, which just takes a weight off any listening parent's shoulders that they are not alone, is a really important message, I think, to spread. So thank you. One of the first things, Rosey, that I wanted to ask you about is with sleep options. There's like so much out there, isn't there? So much.
Oh,
and
God,
it's so conflicting. So we hear terms like co-sleeping, use of next to me crib, sleeping in pram, sleeping in cars, contact naps, all of these ways that parents may navigate a nap or a sleep for their baby. Are any of these better than others?
Right. Well, it's a minefield, isn't it?
Isn't it?
I think when you're a new parent, it can be quite confusing. But first of all, I always say we do need to think about safe sleep. So in the UK, we have the Lullaby Trust, who are the baby sleep charity. So if anyone's interested, you can go and check out all of their guidance. But they say ideally, babies should sleep on a firm, flat mattress which is clear of loose bedding and things like that. So that would either be a cot, a crib, a Moses basket, or if you are sharing a bed with your baby, there are safe bed sharing guidelines, but you shouldn't have any bedding near your baby. They should be on a clear flat mattress with their own appropriate bedding, so you shouldn't have any kind of duvets and things like that on them or near them, or pillows. So in terms of safety, I think that's the first thing I always talk to parents about, and that's the most important because we want to keep our babies safe. But in terms of other sleep and how, especially I think for a lot of parents, one of the challenging things is naps. So getting them to nap in the day, and fixating and worrying that if they don't nap in their cot or their crib, that you're never going to get them to sleep in there and it's just you're doing something wrong. Please don't think that. I've heard other sleep experts or people online saying that sleep in a pram or a sling or a contact nap, whether you're cuddling to sleep and stuff, isn't as quality sleep. That's not true. Any sleep counts. It all counts. It's all restorative. Your baby's getting the sleep that they need, however you get them to do it. So please, if anyone's worried about it, it is fine. However they sleep. I would say sleeping in a car, you do need to just be a bit mindful that they're not restricting their airways and slumping forwards and things like that. And we don't want them sleeping in cars for long periods of time. So the advice is once you're home or you're stationary, trying to move them to somewhere with a flat surface. And we don't want them to sleep in bouncers and kind of swing chairs and things like that. It's fine for your baby to fall asleep in one of those, but ideally you try and transfer them as soon as you can. It's to do with excuse me, it's to do with their positioning, and we don't want their airways to get restricted by accident. But them sleeping on you is fine. Some people find that if they are working on improving their baby's sleep, and perhaps they want to move away from co-sleeping, or they want to change things, they might find that focusing on at least one nap in their cot or their crib during the day might help at night. But it's not essential. I've known plenty of families where they sleep somewhere else completely different and they sleep well at night.
Our babies, I think we as parents, and you can definitely fall in that trap, can't you, of if I want to go out and do things, then my baby's not going to be able to sleep because they're not in their crib. So actually it's quite useful if your baby is able to sleep on you in a pram, in a car, etc., and you aren't then just restricted to the house. Because I definitely fell in that trap of, oh my goodness, we've got to get them sleeping in the cot, but that means that we can't ever go out because we have to be home for those nap times.
I think for your mental health, it's really important to have routine, but flexibility if you can. Now, I know for some people, they do have the opposite challenge in that their babies won't sleep anywhere other than their cots for various reasons. Sometimes refluxy babies, they might struggle in cars. A lot of them don't like sleeping in the car. Some of them might not like sleeping in the buggy. So it's always very individual. But if you are somebody who's able to be flexible, that's quite good. And also, if it's your second baby, for example, like me with my second, her morning nap was always in the buggy because we were doing the nursery run with my elder one. So it just works like that. But she did do most of her lunchtime naps in the cot. But sometimes I wanted to go and see a friend or go out for the day. And sometimes they might do their usual routine, but just on the go. And other days, it might just all fall by the wayside, and you just take it as it comes.
Oh, yeah, it's so important, isn't it? And taking some of that pressure off, which is what you talk about so brilliantly. Now, those nights, Rosey, those early newborn nights and days where the sleep deprivation really does just feel all-consuming, and you can see why parents will desperately grasp at that comparison or any information that may just help things a little bit, because it feels like the hardest thing in the world. What do you recommend that parents do to cope when it is a real tough time?
I would say the first thing and the most important thing is try and create a support network if you can. Now, I appreciate in modern life, we don't necessarily have a village of people to look after us, sadly. And you might live somewhere that's not that close to relatives or friends, family. But if you can create some kind of network, whether that's somebody else in the same position, whether that is a friend or family member who has offered to help, and you say, do you know what, I really would love some help today. Maybe you've had a really bad night, and maybe they come round and help you so you can have a shower, prioritizing your needs. So you may have not slept, but saying, do you know what, I can bring the baby into the bathroom with me, put them in a bouncer while I have a shower. So you're making sure, you are looking after yourself, you are eating. And if you have someone if you're someone who has a baby who won't stop crying, it's really, really hard. But just saying, do you know what? I'm here, I'm with them. I'm going to have a 5 to 10 minute shower while I can supervise them. I'm going to eat something. I'm going to try and rest. And I'm a really big believer of getting out. So if in doubt, get out. I always say this. So actually, and the other one is get out or get in the water. So if you've got an unsettled baby or you're really tired, getting out in the natural light, some fresh air, even if it's just a 10-minute walk around the block. And I found this postnatally, even recovering from a vaginal birth or a C-section. You obviously, you might not feel like walking very far, but just 5 minutes, or just nipping your head out of the door, just to feel the air on your skin, the sun on your skin. If there's sun, it might be cold and cloudy.
The wind,
just
the
a
rain.
change of scene out of the same four walls, I think, is really important. So basically looking after yourself, getting fresh air, getting support when you can, even if that might be, it depends what you're like. So I was talking about this on my Instagram the other day, how I always felt really out of control when the house was really untidy and I wanted to clean, but I was recovering from a C-section with 2 other kids. It's like, realistically, I'm not going to be cleaning the house. But my thing is, I'm like, right, if you feel like you need to do something before you can relax, just focus on one room. Just be like, right, I'm just going to do a couple of minutes of just tidying up. And then each day you focus on a different room. And also, if you have somebody who might offer kindly to do your vacuuming or something, or even if you could hire a cleaner like once a month or once every 6 weeks, can make a really big difference. So that's like the practical stuff. But in terms of sleep, I think don't underestimate the power of light and dark. So with newborns, so about getting out, that is a really good thing for you and your baby. So trying to get your newborn exposed to natural light in the day. So when newborns are first born, they're born nocturnal. So a lot of them have night and day completely mixed up.
Such a design fault, isn't it? Like, why haven't we made that better?
Yeah, it's very frustrating for so many parents. So during the day, lots of natural light exposure. That might not even be going out, even just putting them near to a window can really help. And then at night, keeping it dark. So I know if you might be struggling with feeding, whether that's breastfeeding or bottle feeding, you need to see what you're doing. I really recommend an amber light. So I have a recommendation of an amber reading light. They're not expensive at all, to keep things nice and dark during the night. Amber light doesn't disturb our sleep as much as blue and white light. So it can be a really big difference between your baby and you being awake for quite a long time. The ideal scenario is babies obviously wake to feed and we need to change them and stuff. The ideal scenario is that you can go back to sleep quickly. And I think that's really key. I always thought that with all of mine, if I was able to go back to sleep quickly, the night didn't actually feel too bad. It's when you're awake for hours. So light can play a big part in that. And also bearing in mind during the day, you might have a baby who's sleeping really well and for really long naps. That's fine, but you don't want them to sleep through feeds. So there's this myth of never waking a sleeping baby. I disagree with that. I think you want to wake them regularly through the day so that they are feeding, and you don't really want your newborn sort of sleeping for more than 3 hours in the day at a time. So you can make sure they're feeding.
That makes sense, because presumably otherwise they're just a bit peckish at night, and they're going to wake more for feeds, which is what we're kind of trying to avoid as they get a bit older, so we can all get a little bit more kip. Really useful, Rosey. And actually it makes sense what you say about the light thing, because we know, don't we, that if we use screens before bed, it's not good for our sleep. So the kind of white lights that are traditionally in our light bulbs is essentially the same, isn't it, for our babies, I suppose?
Yeah.
Makes sense. We just haven't linked the two, so that's super, super helpful. The other term we hear all the time, and I'm sure if you are a parent to a baby over 3 months, you have to Google this at some point, is sleep regression. What on earth are they? Can we avoid them, or is it inevitable?
Oh, the old sleep regression. I think there's so much fear around it, and misinformation. So sleep regression, I really don't like this term, because
it's very negative, doesn't it?
Yeah, the concept of a regression actually in pediatrics is something quite serious. It's a loss of a skill. Your baby isn't losing a skill. So there is only one regression of sorts, which is around 4 months. I say around because it can actually happen way before that or a little bit afterwards. So I tend to say between sort of 3 to 6 months on average, there's a change in the way your baby sleeps. This isn't something negative. They're not losing a skill, although it might feel like it. Some of them you won't even notice a difference. And then, you might be waiting for the day they turn 4 months and there's no perceived change. However, you might discover that your baby is more wakeful. They're also more alert. They kind of wake up around this time as well, and some of them get a bit of FOMO. They like to be seeing what's going
Involved.
on. The way that they sleep changes biologically, and their sleep cycles become more like an adult. So this can result in more waking at night, shorter naps. You might find that they're harder to settle, all these kind of things. But it doesn't mean that they're broken. It doesn't mean that things won't get better and that you can't improve things. this is the only sleep regression. Now, a lot of people talk about sleep regressions at other ages, and I think it's a bit misleading because biologically nothing else changes, but we do have developmental changes, and these can happen at any time. So children are on a trajectory where they are developing all the time, on a slightly different timeline, but there are certain ages where we tend to see changes. So like average kind of ages of crawling, walking, talking, all these kind of things. Those things can affect sleep, and ideally it's just a temporary blip sometimes. Other things can affect sleep, like illness, and we can't plan for that. That could be kind of, and this winter's been just brutal for everyone.
Horrendous.
We've had so many bugs and viruses, and those can really wreak havoc on sleep. Things like starting nursery, moving home, new siblings, potty training, going on holiday, all these things can affect sleep. So basically, try not to worry about it, because your path might look very different to somebody else's. And if you're talking to somebody who knows this, oh, we're going through like, I don't know, an 8-month regression or this regression or that regression, try not to get caught up in it, because first of all, you might not notice anything different about your baby. Second of all, they might not follow the same path. And thirdly, if you do want to work on it, you can work on improving your baby's sleep really at any age. And I think from 4 months and up, you have a good window of opportunity to start practicing different ways, if you want to, of settling into sleep or improving their overall sleep.
That's really reassuring to hear, actually, because often around this regression there's so much kind of negativity, and like you say, fear. People are really worried about it and really fearful of it. And I think it's useful, just from listening to you speak there, Rosie, is actually sleep isn't just this like one sort of line that we follow. It really is peaks and troughs and ups and downs.
Yes.
And we often wake, don't we, especially if we're unwell or unsettled, or we're staying in a hotel room, we don't sleep as well. And actually we shouldn't really expect our babies to just be completely linear, when as adults we aren't.
Yeah. I always say sleep is fluid. So think of it like kind of like a flowing river. And it's not always going to be calm. There's going to be times when it changes and there's twists and turns. And really, none of us completely sleep through the night. So we do go through sleep cycles between light and deep sleep, and we'll stir between those sleep cycles. And it might be that there's a partial arousal, so you kind of half wake up. You might fully wake up, or you might just, it might just be you can't even notice. You might see your partner or your baby just twitch or something. So for some babies, they might wake between every sleep cycle and look for assistance from their parent, or others might connect those sleep cycles themselves and resettle themselves. It's really variable.
It is so variable, isn't it? And that's where that comparison is just, we say, don't we? Comparison is a thief of joy, and it's so true when it comes to babies and sleep, I think.
Yeah.
Can we bust a couple of myths, Rosie, that we hear all the time? And I think mums listening, this is going to be super helpful and reassuring. First up, breastfeeding is stopping your baby sleeping better at night. I know this is one that lots of breastfeeding mums hear.
That's a big fat false.
A big fat false. So is it true to say, in your experience working with parents, that actually mode of feeding has no impact on sleep?
I think that in certain circumstances, if there's feeding challenges, it can impact sleep. But I think that on the whole, if you look at it, if I looked at a sample of parents, I've helped, I would say 50-50 formula and breastfeeding, breast milk. I don't think there is a difference. Anecdotally, I think a lot of people will say that breastfed babies don't sleep, but there really isn't any evidence for that.
Yeah, it's so true.
The evidence we do have, actually, there's a piece of research, is that after in the first couple of weeks, breastfed babies overall slept a little bit less, but past the first few weeks, the waking patterns of babies are very, very similar.
That's really good to hear for any mums that are breastfeeding, thinking actually maybe the breastfeeding is the thing that's kind of impacting sleep. But like you say, I guess a fed baby, however, by whatever means, is going to probably sleep better than a hungry baby. So.
Yeah, and actually, if you look at the calories in breast milk and formula, they're almost identical, which is really interesting, because I think kind of alongside that myth is the myth that breast milk isn't as filling, and it's the same.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. So feed your baby by whatever mode
Yes.
you've chosen, without thinking that is going to be your route to better or worse sleep.
Yes.
The other myth I wanted to bring up with you is, I hate this one. It makes me really sad, especially when parents believe it.
Okay.
But that is that we hear the term, you are spoiling your baby by picking them up and cuddling them all the time, so they will never learn to sleep alone.
Oh, it's so sad. And I've heard so many parents tell me that people have told them this, and then later they just regret, like, just agonizing over it. It's part of human nature to cuddle our babies and nurture them and be close to them. There's so many benefits to it. The oxytocin, our love hormone, is created when we're close to one another. Even things like they benefit from the bacteria on our skin. We pass bacteria between one and each other to help our immune systems. It's honestly fascinating. But in terms of sleep, honestly, don't worry about it, please. You can't cuddle them too much. The only time I would say is if you are deciding, right, we're in an unsustainable situation where I'm waking up numerous times a night, I'm not coping, and I want them to sleep in their cots, then maybe you might be like, right, instead of cuddling to sleep, I might cuddle to sleepy, and then the next night I might just hold to sleep, then I might put them in their cot and put my hands on them, this kind of thing. We can gradually work on improving a situation, but absolutely you can't cuddle your baby too much or hold them too much or love them too much. They cannot manipulate you. That's just not a thing. They don't have that prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain which is responsible for manipulation. That part is not developed. And it's actually not fully developed until I think we're age 21. But I'm not. That's not saying a teenager can't manipulate you. But babies absolutely cannot manipulate you, and they can't be spoiled.
And I love that, because it's such an important message. I think it's something that certainly in my parents, my grandparents' generation was a real belief, that this little person could manipulate you, and that if you were cuddling them, you were spoiling them. But oh my goodness, these babies grow so quickly. Just cuddle them. Who doesn't want to cuddle a newborn baby? They're just beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rosey. So yes, lots of ways that mums can start to relax about what they're doing for them and their baby, because the chances are they're doing a bloody amazing job, and it's really, really tough. So we need to be patting new mums on their back, not filling their minds with these awful myths.
Absolutely.
Now, everyone that comes on the podcast, Rosey, I asked for 3 top tips. So I wonder if you could share 3 top tips to parents who are struggling with their little one's sleep, and give them some hope for better sleep in the future, I guess.
Okay, so there's 3 key things I want to talk about, and they're things I always talk about actually when we're looking at the sleep challenge. So number 1, sleep environment. So reassess your sleep environment. Is there some way, and that's just meaning where your baby sleeps, or if your baby's under 6 months or perhaps beyond that, you might be sleeping with them. So can you make it darker? That's normally really helpful, especially as we move into spring, summer, as it's lighter in the mornings. A lot of people struggle with early waking or getting their babies to settle at bedtime. Blacking it out, making sure it's not too hot. So ideally, sort of, you want it between sort of 17 and 21 degrees. I know we can't always control it, so it might be a little bit variable. Are they comfortable in their sleep space, appropriately dressed? So, not too many layers, but enough, that kind of thing. And as I spoke about earlier on, the light kind of during the night and things like that. So that kind of is sleep environment. Maybe white noise. There's lots of things we can utilize, but just step back and have a think about, is there something we could do? Then have a look at routine. So routine is my number 2 tip. So first of all, don't fixate on it. Don't get really stressed about it. If it's stressful, just be like, right, take a deep breath and let's just do what we want to do for the day and see what happens. Yeah. But if you are somebody who really feels like they need and they want a routine, try and start your day roughly the same time each day. So it doesn't have to be bang on like 7 a.m, but you might have a window, for example, of 6:30 to 7:30 in the morning, and trying to start your day within that window. And I know, especially if it's your first child, and I had this with my first, I remember sometimes if we'd had a rough night, we might not start the day till kind of 9 o'clock in the morning because we've been up for hours in the night. So it can be tricky, but I think it's really helpful to try and anchor our internal body clocks, our circadian rhythms, by having a rough kind of routine. And if you start the day at roughly the same time, sometimes those nap times become easier to predict, because you can think, right, my baby, look at your baby, you can think my baby is happily awake for a couple of hours and then they need a nap. So you kind of get a rhythm to your day. So look at routine, make sure they're not sleeping too much during the day where you've got night and day confused, but enough that they're happy, they're well rested, they're happy between their naps and that kind of thing. So routine, getting it nice and balanced. And then the third one, and I think this is where things become more controversial, is settling, so how they settle, and working on something that's sustainable for you. And one of the things, I talk about this a lot in my book and just generally, everyone has a different level of sleep deprivation that they can handle, and things might feel sustainable to one person and not to another. So please remember that everyone is different. We have a different approach. For some people, safe co-sleeping might be a great answer. Waiting it out, even if you do nothing, your baby sleep will improve. But you might be someone who says, I just need to work on this, and that is okay. And finding a solution to gradually, gently, lovingly change the boundaries of how your baby falls asleep can really, really help some people. So reassessing that, having a chat with your partner if you have one, or friends and family, see how you feel about it, and see if you do want to get support, please get support.
I love that. Taking all of that guilt away from what you choose to do for you and your baby, because like you say, no journey is the same. We are all so unique, which is what makes us human beings. So thank you so much, Rosey. You are a sleep god. And for anyone listening who's thinking, actually, yes, sleep is a challenge, or perhaps you're pregnant and it's something that you are worried about, head over to the episode description where you can find Rosey's book, which is available for pre-order now, which is very, very exciting. So thank you, Rosey.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before you head off, I just need to tell you something. 68% of you who listen to my podcast have not hit the subscribe button. So can you do me a favor? If you have ever enjoyed listening, and hit subscribe now. It makes a huge difference and helps me to keep bringing you episodes. The bigger the podcast, the bigger the guests, and the more women we can reach and help. Thank you for subscribing, and I look forward to chatting again soon.
I'm Laura.
I'm Lauren.
And this is Go Love Yourself. She went, you're 26? I was like, size 26? Yeah. And she was like, oh, right, that makes sense.
This is the show where we're learning to love ourselves a little more and taking you along with us.
I grew up never seeing anybody that looked like me, and that made me feel like not part of society, like almost like not a woman, because I just never felt like I fit in.
If you've got a relative that is mean about your body, Laura, what do we say to them?